Marcus, no slides. In 2006, the president appointed an 11-man policy directing. It was an 11-man team to direct where the Universal Service Fund would be used, and this was formed under the NCC Act, National Communications Commission Act. Since then, they have come up with pretty great projects, great interventions. However, if you go around looking, you would not find reports as to where that money has gone, what they've been able to do with it since 2018. Meanwhile, a 2019 report from the Senate shows that there has been a recurrent expense of 1.9 billion naira to that fund every single year. So there has been no transparency with regards to the Universal Service Fund in Nigeria. I, as a Nigerian, was pretty jealous when I saw the strides that has been made with the fund in other countries, and they being able to break down where it has gone, what has happened, but there was absolutely nothing to find in the Nigerian context, and that is alarming. So moving forward to the other findings of the report, Nigeria. Okay. In terms of access to the internet, we had better access in the year 2022. We moved on to 45.5% broadband penetration with 152 million subscribers on the internet as at October. Wonderful. I mean, okay, I will just speaking. Okay. All right. Moving forward, we also had the rollout of the 5G network in Nigeria in 2022. The contract was given initially to two companies, MTN and Mofab Mobile Networks. So far, another additional service provider has joined the team, which is Airtel, which has, of course, improved internet access and broadband penetration. So moving on to free speech. What did free speech look like in 2022? In 2022, January 2022, the ban on Twitter was lifted from Nigeria. Yay. In June 2022, the ECOWAS court ruled that the Twitter ban was unlawful and inconsistent with Nigeria's public obligations. We also saw a lot of regulatory attempts at free speech, one of which would have been the NITDA Code of Practice. It was brought out to, one of the conditions that came with the ban of Twitter was that all social media networks come down to Nigeria, register, have an office, have staff, people that are accessible to the country. And what the NITDA Code of Practice was trying to do was, of course, streamline what exactly that would have looked like. However, one of the things that the Code of Practice mentioned was that NITDA, being the technology development agency, wanted to be able to tell the social media networks what is unlawful content and have them remove said unlawful content within 24 hours without review, appeal, all of that. And just knowing how governments tend to work, it had the potential for abuse and it had a lot of pushback. In terms of surveillance in 2022, we've always had a very bulky surveillance budget. We saw a 2.7 trillion naira defense budget with surveillance equipment purchased. Despite that, we saw a lot of increase in cyber attacks. The attacks were focused on small and medium enterprises. We reported at least 75,000 personal data breaches of citizens within Nigeria. However, the National Nigerian Data Protection Regulation, which was the regulation at the time, had only issued out 10 fines towards companies that were found to be breaching data practices. This is in comparison to the report of over 1,000 reports to the Bureau at the time. When it comes to emerging technology, we also saw that ICT was boosting the Nigerian GDP by 92.5%, overtaking the place of oil in Nigeria. We also saw the Nigerian Startup Act passed, and the Technology Development Agency made an attempt at developing a national AI policy. Input was made, however, that did not move forward before administrations were changed. However, we've seen that the new Minister for Digital Economies is making a new attempt, so we're hoping that that moves forward. So I'll hand it over to Bulanda to give us a brief on Zambia.
Thank you very much, Khadija. In moving along, just to present a bit of the Zambia findings. So I'll start off with just looking at the overall digital rights landscape and what transpired within 2022. And then I'll zero in on the Universal Service Access Fund a bit more. So maybe just to start off with a few statistics that will help us when we get to the USF part. Of course, Zambia is a relatively small country, over 19 million people, and our mobile subscription rate in the current coverage period is at 99%. So this is a significant drop because previously we had recorded a coverage of over 100%. Internet penetration, of course, is up to about 53%, so just over half of the population have access to the internet. It's also worth mentioning that 60% of our population live within rural settings and 40% within urban areas. So for the first time in 2022, we got 5G network. And of course, the fourth mobile operator was introduced. So the reason being that overall, as a country, we've been experiencing poor network quality. Those that have been followers of London or the other digital rights report would note that previously, the other two mobile network providers have been fined, I think, about 4 times by the regulator for not providing poor network. So all this was lead to, increase competition and hopefully improve ICT services within the country. So that's in terms of introducing 5G and bringing in a fourth player. So, poor network, of course, continues to be a significant problem and could possibly hurt our plans for, implementing e-voting systems. So those systems and plans have been put on hold until we can sort our network issues. And even the Ministry of Technology and Science has called for an investigation into this matter. Then in 2021, those that would recall, we experienced an internet shutdown during the election. So 2021 was, a hive of activities. 2022, not as eventful. But what was encouraging was that in 2022, so those that would know the backstory to the internet shutdown, it was challenged by one of the local human rights organizations. It was a strategic litigation case, really around my case where civil society we sued the regulator and won, and they restored the internet. So that case was agreed to not act outside of its legal authority and to inform the public and all subscribers of any internet access disruption within 36 hours. It's a bit of a good milestone, but again, that decision makes me a little bit uncomfortable because it's not proactive. the regulator has to inform you of an internet disruption 36 hours later or within 36 hours. Not so proactive, really. And then, so 2021, we ushered in a new government. And even when they came into power, they made a lot of positive pronouncements around, legal reforms, improving the media sector, the ICT sector. So a lot of positive pronouncements were made to reform some of the repressive legislation in particular. But what we saw, for example, is that so three pieces of, let's say, legislation that I could speak to was the review of the Cybersecurity and Cybercrimes Act. That was one that was really a campaign promise, lots of good pronouncements, but once they came into power, that bill is still under review. 2 years on, I mean, they've been in power now 3 years. Of course, we gave them a year to settle. So 2 years on, it's still on the list, and yet we've seen that there have been other bills that were not as pressing, but they seem to be, paying a priority to. And the other one would be the enactment of the Access to Information Bill of 2013, very old bill, close to 20 years old. Of course, they came in with a view of, conducting stakeholder consultations and reviews. That has been concluded. We were promised that it would be enacted in June of 2023, and that has not happened. Our government has been silent on that. And the other one was really just to reform the media sector and introduce a few other legislations. Then in the last coverage period, of course, we recorded 12 arrests and detentions of individuals for, the posts that they made online, and most of these were charged under defamation of the president provisions within our penal code. And interestingly enough, in December of last year, that provision was abolished. But of course, while that's, abolition of the defamation of the president clause, it is progressive, it is positive. I think some of our concerns have been around, while that specific provision may have been abolished, there are still other provisions within other pieces of the law that could still facilitate for arrests and detentions for online activities. So some of them within the penal code and others within the Cybersecurity Act. And interestingly enough, as of 2023, all the arrests that we are seeing now are being charged under the Cybersecurity Act. So take out one piece of legislation, leave the other ones that can still more or less do the same thing. In terms of data governance, so as of the coverage period, we made a recommendation that as a country, we needed a data protection commissioner, data protection office, and that has been implemented, although it was not very explicit. For example, I only came to know that we now have a data protection commissioner in a news item where they mentioned the data protection commissioner. So it was not really made explicit to say, to mention which specific office, for example, because there's still a bit of confusions right now where people believe that the regulator is the data protection commissioner. And as you may know, we introduced the digital ID system, and of course, we've been running some safe city projects. So it was key that we needed a data protection office, especially if we are planning to roll out some e-voting systems. Then now just to zero in on the Universal Service Fund. So ZICTA, the regulator, manages that fund. And the last information that we got was in 2021, where they raised about $5 million. Okay, I hope I'm audible enough. I'll try and shout a bit. But one of the significant changes, the USF fund, and it's quite encouraging and maybe different from the Nigeria. Okay. So in terms of how our USF has been rolled out, I'd say ours is quite encouraging compared to what I heard from Khadija. One thing I can say, however, is that information is not as easily available in terms of how our USF is being administered. But from what we're able to gather, so a new Directorate of Universal Access and Service Fund was established to enhance corporate governance. So while ZICTA manages this fund, within that, within ZICTA, they established a USF Directorate just to enhance corporate governance and how the fund is being administered. Because previously, the USF's effectiveness was coming into question. So every time Parliament would sit, people would question, how are we using all the money that we are collecting for USF? And some of the projects that the USF has been used for, there were about over 1,000 communication towers that were supposed to be erected, and that has been completed. And I think you can see even from our mobile coverage has increased to almost 100% thanks to some of those towers, even in touching in some of the rural areas. Also, projects around last mile fiber optic connectivity to research institutions, universities, colleges, schools, and other public education facilities. So besides connecting learning institutions, we've seen that the USF has been used to connect health facilities, as well as an inclusive connect program that aims to empower persons with disabilities. So that's a bit of the progress that we are seeing in Zambia. So the USF has gone a long way in terms of expanding network connectivity and bridging the digital divide. But I think one of the things that has been key is the establishment of that directorate, because now we're able to enforce transparency and accountability in how the money is being used. But of course, a lot still remains in terms of improving network quality, but also expanding the national electricity grid, because some of the challenges that have been seen are that you select, let's say, priority schools which you would like to connect with ICT services, but you get there with your computers and that place has no power. I remember I mentioned earlier that about 60% of the population is in rural settings. So again, they may have access to mobile phones, mobile connectivity, but then even when they need to charge their gadget, they have to rely on solar power. So really we need more deliberate efforts in how we connect rural areas, and also in terms of how we continue to provide specialized, for example, equipment for those with disabilities. Interestingly enough, we should be launching a new ICT policy and the national digital transformation strategies. So we're really hopeful that within that we have better roadmaps on how we can address those challenges. So that's a bit about what we are seeing in Zambia in terms of overall digital rights landscape and the USF. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bulanda, for that.
Thank you so much, Bulanda, for that summation of the Zambia context, and Khadija for the summation of the Nigeria context. It's also interesting to see that all of these African countries have so many similarities. I would also like to welcome those who are just joining us. I would also like to welcome those who are listening to us via online. So at this point, I will give a summation of the Zimbabwean context as well. So in Zimbabwe has an internet penetration of 61.3%. These are statistics from the Postal and Telecommunications Regulatory Authority of Zimbabwe 2022 report. And mobile penetration is expected to rise to 75.8% by 2025. And even though this is this way, we still see that in Zimbabwe, there's a rise of internet shutdowns. In the year 2022, we documented an internet shutdown in February 2022. And this internet shutdown, in fact, it was a throttling of internet speeds during a rally by one of the major opposition political parties. So we tend to see that these internet shutdowns are normally targeted and normally politically motivated. And in terms of the cost of data, in Zimbabwe, we see that the cost of data is very expensive. I'll give an example. When using any of the subscribers, 11 gigabytes of data is normally about $20 US. And as Zimbabweans, I mean, we generally believe that this is too much and a lot could be done to try and reduce this cost. And in terms of free speech and media freedoms, Zimbabwe is ranked 137 out of 180 by the World Press Freedom Rankings. I mean, you can already see where we are placed, 137 out of 180. We're not even below the half. So which means in terms of media freedom, I would say the country is not free. So we look at, we also analyzed during the 2020 report that journalists were arrested during the course of the year, and this really undermines press freedom. And these are journalists being arrested over tweets that they've made online. So you can already see the indication that press freedom in Zimbabwe is something to be worried about. Then when we come, it is also, well, to put it into context, Zimbabwe in the constitution has a section on freedom of expression, which is section 61 of the constitution. But these digital rights violations continue to occur. And there's also a similarity to the Zambian context where journalists and individuals are arrested over false statements and defamation statements that are said to be defamation to the president. And these statements are primarily mainly focused on Zimbabwe's laws, particularly the Criminal Law Act and Criminal Code Section 33, which talks about statements, false statements, and obscene material against the president. So disorders, there's also a concern in Zimbabwe because there's so much disinformation happening online, particularly targeted even at women and also targeted at journalists. It looks like there's a competition of mics now. All right, I'll proceed. Then in terms of data governance in Zimbabwe, we have the Cyber and Data Protection Act, which was instituted in the year 2021 in December. So in our 2022 Londa report, we documented the change of name of the act. The act was previously the Data Protection Act, and in March 2021, it was changed to the Cyber and Data Protection Act, mainly to incorporate the aspect of cybersecurity. And to us, when analyzing Londa, we found that to be quite complex because once we changed to Cyber and Data Protection Act, there seemed to be more interest in cybersecurity rather than data protection, and mainly because governments in Africa also seem to want to focus more on cybersecurity and rather than just the data protection aspect. And when it comes to the Universal Service Fund, the Universal Service Fund in Zimbabwe was established by Section 73 of the Postal and Telecommunications Act, and this Universal Service Fund so far has provided support through instituting community information centers, and these community information centers have been dotted around the country. You will see right there that at least some of the community information centers were established in the year 2022. And it is also interesting to note that in our analysis, we sort of felt there could be more initiative by government to have these community information centers dotted around rural areas where access to the internet is really low. So part of the things that we analyzed when looking at the Universal Service Fund were also the fact that in terms of the allocation of the Universal Service Fund, there was about 120,000 allocated for this. And through the Universal Service Fund, POTRAS also put out a call for the provision of solar power backup systems to be placed in rural areas. This was mainly because access to the internet, as we know, is very scarce and limited in rural areas. And we see that this would be important because when we look at the statistics in terms of the population of Zimbabwe, 32.5% of Zimbabweans are in urban areas, while 67% areas, and these are the most areas without access to the internet. And it's also very interesting to see that in Zimbabwe, when it comes to the digital gender gap, research by other institutions indicates that in Zimbabwe, women have more access to the internet more than men. I don't know why that is. I don't know why that is, because I find it really, but I really find it interesting, and I'm sure it's something we can ponder on as we continue to discuss. So at this point, I will then allow participants to engage so we can have a question and answer session and interact and find out if how as Africa we can tackle the challenges of digital rights. Thanks. All right, I'll start off by giving one of my colleagues here, Bulanda, who says she has a theory. So I'll give it to her.
Oh my goodness, she was joking. She had a theory on why women have more access to the internet in Zimbabwe. And she just thought they like things, they like to shop. And that is why they're online more. But then, we'd love to hear if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, if you think that there are certain parts of the report you don't agree with, if there are perhaps things you would have liked to see more of, hear more of in the report. So for those who joined a bit later, Londa is a report on the digital rights and inclusion situation in Africa. We focused on the Universal Service Fund, freedom of expression, internet shutdowns, emerging technologies, what else? Really just the situation of rights and inclusion in Africa. We focused on Zimbabwe, Nigeria, and Zambia, and you have something to say. Who's giving him the mic? Please.
Thank you very much. Wonderful presentation. My name is Abubakar from National IT Development Agency. A good report. I think it was better. The report on the data protection regulation. Nigeria has got the Data Protection Commission now. So it's gone past, so there was work going on the data protection, setting up the Data Protection Commission. It did highlight that the government had called for consultation and stakeholder engagement. So there is a Data Protection Commission for Nigeria at the moment. So which is a positive step towards the identity issues you mentioned also in the report. I just skimmed through the report for the first time. Secondly, USPF, I think the report could have also gone on to investigate on the things, the projects and interventions, like she had mentioned for Zambia, yeah, in terms of fiber connectivity to universities, school access programs, school access projects, and so on. There's so many projects so I don't know the method of data collection, whether it's from their website or you have to visit the USPF office to collect information on the project that they've done, even though it's from 2016 to 2021, right? The London report. So
2022.
Yeah, it's 2022. Yeah. So of course, you would have also noticed the increase in internet penetration, broadband connectivity, and so on, which could be credit to some of the activities of the USPF. They could also be more transparent, like the report has highlighted. And then thirdly, about digital rights. So the question is, still, debatable or arguable whether or not to regulate social media platforms and so on. And the argument is there. So what is these social media platforms in order for a country that has huge population like Nigeria to continue to remain sane, while also something had to be put in place like the code of practice with general consultations with the community on what NIDA felt is the obligation of, I'm not speaking on behalf of NIDA, by the way, what NIDA felt is the obligation of social media platforms towards, what are their responsibilities towards Nigerian citizens in order that the space is kept safe for security, for ensuring also the privacy and online protection, especially of vulnerable people, of which also it wasn't available at then, but the child online protection policy and strategy was also developed by the agencies under the Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy. So there is a child online protection policy currently for Nigeria as well, which would also support the rights, the digital rights of what the report is essentially looking at. So just comments to add to some of the things you've mentioned and to contextualize some of the findings as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Abubakar, you said your name was. So the report, I think we stopped research maybe October of 20, and it was 2022, and we're currently, I believe, seeking out authors for 2023. So yeah, some things would have been missing in between the time where we stopped the research, such as the National Data Protection Act being passed, the Bureau becoming a commission. We were a part of the consultation process for the policy on children. So I can definitely give you credit for that. I also we do not believe that social media companies, should go willy-nilly and do whatever it is that they want. However, I do not believe that the consultation process taken by NIDA truly took in the suggestions from civil society. So the argument there was not that they should not be regulated or that there shouldn't be certain context taken, but it was the part of the code that said once NIDA says, basically the way it was read was, once paraphrasing here, once NIDA says take down this content online, which is illegal, do it in 24 hours. There was no room for appeal. There was no NIDA is not the authority to tell everybody what legal or illegal content is, and the regulation did not specify what legal or illegal content is, and it has a tendency for abuse. I mean, you're not going to be in NIDA forever. So who is to say that while you're the person on top of what legal and illegal content online is today, you're not going to be on the other side of being targeted by whoever might be in power tomorrow, defining what legal or illegal content is. Very shortly, there is that gap in the Cyber Crimes Act that can allow for arrest of journalists, etc. Before you know it, you say something that someone deems to be inappropriate, something that like what happens in Zimbabwe, next thing you know, you're being arrested. So it was in attempt to cover that gap and ensure that there is no wanton abuse of power. I need to say that we're all on the same side. Civil society and government. And when we give the recommendations that we give, it's not in a bid to attack, but in a bid to make sure that everybody is protected, including you when you leave power. I do take, we did a survey on what the Londa reports covered very recently and whether or not it was in depth enough. So I appreciate your criticism, and we're going to do better with the next report. I also had one more comment that I forgot. Anyway, yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Khadija, for responding to that comment. And we're still taking questions. Just 2 more questions. There's a hand at the back.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I just have a comment in regards to the Zimbabwean aspect. I scanned through the Londa report. I haven't thoroughly read it, I'll admit, but I just want to comment in as far as the 60% that is being, the 60% in penetration that has, which is questionable because according to other independent bodies, they state that the internet penetration in Zimbabwe stands around the 30s, and Porter's regard of internet penetration is largely based on their interpretation of internet is WhatsApp, and WhatsApp is not internet. So I felt that maybe it needed to be qualified, that statement needed to be qualified. Yeah, that's my comment, because you take in regard like the marginalization of communities. Mostly rural communities don't have infrastructure, and Zimbabwe is in like a downward trend in as far as economics. So we might feel like we're inclined to believe that 30% penetration vis-a-vis the 60% penetration being stated by the regulator. Thank you.
Thanks for that comment. I mean, it is very much interesting to see how public bodies are putting together their statistics. And I'm sure also in our next 2023 report, we'll also take that into account and incorporate and also qualify the statements that we put in the report. So if there are no further questions, we can wrap up the session. Are there further questions? No. All right. So thank you so much for coming through to engage with us on the Londa report. And of course, if you'd like to partner with us in either distributing or documenting these digital rights developments within the African region, we can always engage more after this. So there's a number of ways that you could partner. And when we do engage, we can then see how we can collaborate together in the quest for advancing digital rights within the African region. Thank you so much. We hope you have a good day.
It's not a good.